Hello, Jennifer.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, I am Peter Spalding. I am on the board of NWSID, Northwest Society of Interior Designers, and I'm here with another board member and president for numerous years, um, Jennifer Myers. Jennifer is a Portland-based interior designer who has years of experience. And as part of our series of interviews, she is going to give us some of her vast knowledge. Um, the sort of theme of these series of interviews is epic failure. And I doubt that Jennifer has ever experienced truly epic failure, but a lot of the questions are going to be based on around what could go wrong in a design project. Um, and I think even the very best practitioners have experienced some sense of this could have gone better. So to begin very generically, Jennifer, I thought maybe you could just tell us a little bit about how your career in the profession of interior design got started.
Well, I had the privilege of growing up with a father who was a builder and general contractor and custom home builder. So I basically grew up on, construction sites, job sites, custom homes. So it really was probably just always what I wanted to do. So basically, after high school, explored colleges at that point and didn't really find a fit. So went to work and then ultimately went back to school in interior design at the University of Arizona. And sort of my career was launched from there. I had the awesome privilege of working with a fabulous designer in Tucson when I was there. And I will say that was an amazing educational experience to have had that, to work with somebody who high-end clients, even back in the early 80s, flew in with their private plane and said, I like blue and we'll be back in 6 months, So, I mean, it was just, education you can't get from school, which was fabulous.
Was that in tandem with school, or was that right
Correct.
after you
No,
completed school?
it was in tandem. One thing that U of A did was in the first term of a freshman year, you did a 15-hour internship. And so you went out to different design firms or furniture stores or whatever, an intern to kind of find out a little bit more about the industry. And so I was lucky to get do my internship with his firm. And then because I was, a little bit older, 24, he hired me to work in the studio while I was going to school. So that was great.
Awesome.
So.
It sounds like he was very trusting of even young people. Is that?
I think so. He was, it was it was the library. It was helping with the client paperwork. It was, helping the office manager as well as doing library things. It was receiving product. So it was kind of, all the backdoor stuff, but he definitely was very embracing of students and, and the field of interior design and the education of students. So that was an awesome experience.
Great. And so tell us about after that and after school, how you came about your very first client and whether you looked at that project as a successful one. And if not, I guess even if, what did you learn from it?
Well, it was kind of interesting because in thinking about it, the one project that just totally resonates with me, it was, like many of us, referrals are a lot of our business, and this was a referral from, if I remember correctly, it must have been a realtor because I worked when I came back from Arizona to the Portland area. I worked with the family in a building situation, and so I had contacts with real estate agents. But anyhow, my first red flag should have been I was about the fourth designer they had hired. And so, it was not a full, redo, but it was paint colors and a couple updated pieces of furniture and stuff. And then it came time to accessorize. And so we sort of weathered our way through all of that. There were a few bumps in the road, like the smell of paint and, things that we had to kind of get through. This was back before there was all the no and low VOC things. So, there definitely used to be smell to paint. And and I found, it took us a while, but we found an amazing custom, art piece from a local regional artist at a gallery, and they loved it. It was brought out, loved it. They didn't like the frame because the artist just framed with like a piece of lattice that he just simply did around his canvas just to sort of finish the canvas.
Yeah.
No intention that it needed to be more than that. And he was the artist, in his mind, that was fine. Well, the clients wanted a frame and they didn't feel like they should have to purchase the frame. So this was like, and I guess to fast forward, the kind of straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, was back, when you had just a phone, like a landline, and they had my home phone number. We didn't have cell phones, and they called me on a Sunday morning at home and wanted to discuss that the gallery was only willing to give them like $150 credit towards a frame or something like that. And that was unacceptable to them. And I just said, I was like kind of to hear. And I said, I think you need to decide if you like the painting or not, because that's really where we're at.
Yeah.
And I never heard from him again. So anyhow, don't know whatever happened after that.
So was everything finished except for this piece?
Yeah, that was it. And
Well, at least you're not sitting there with stuff ordered for them.
No, this was the end, and and it was a long process to find even a painting that they liked, so at the end you're like, I don't think you want this done, and there's nothing more I can do for you.
I've had that experience a few times where overall a project has gone really well. And then at the very end, even after we've installed everything, there's a couple little pieces that they want. And somehow that's just like way more complicated than building the whole house.
Correct. Yeah. And I think it's interesting with, I think, accessories, why some designers I don't even think are willing to even go down that path. A lot of them just, here's some suggestions.
Yeah.
Go out, find, if you want me to come look at it, give my opinion, great, but I'm not going to do the sourcing for you, is that it is so personal. And especially if they tend to find everything has to have a very personal meaning to them, then that, unless they have nothing but money and want to pay you to go shopping all day long. So,
which is great.
It's great.
Happy
Most
to
people
do that.
don't, most people are not willing to do that though. So,
no. Okay, so every experienced designer sets out to have a project run perfectly and to be as profitable as they can make it. And really to leave their client thirsty to come back to them. What are some steps that you implement right away to ensure that your project runs smoothly?
Well, I love to know, like in construction, the team that's going to be on board and get a team meeting in place to kind of talk about, from a general contractor's perspective, what they need from me, how they like to have their information, those kind of things. Can we establish a project meeting time that all questions are sort of formulated for that session, unless it's a 911. Those projects I find run the most successful because everybody's on board, everybody's clear about what the expectations are, and it just seems to be not calls while you're driving down the freeway and you're trying to remember what that was that you said you wanted to do and what that looked like. And here you can be sitting on in the last year, we could sit on a Zoom meeting and I could be on my desktop looking at something or saying and emailing it off to them and those kind of things. So I find that kind of communication thing is so key, and however the team comes together. I also think that for myself, I tend to be very hands-on about things, and I have that management part of what I like to do with my projects. And so for me, I think for our projects to be successful, we're part of that. No matter how small something may be, it's very hard to not be engaged, I guess, and be the kind of go-to person for the project.
So this wasn't one of the preset questions, but it's relevant, I think. You do a lot of new construction projects. How much specification are you participating in? Are you having walls moved? Are you or um,
Can. Like the
yeah,
most recent one we did, she had bought a kind of stock plan, and it really was a project. This would be a great case study because it really should have been a custom design. We should have hired a building designer slash or an architect and started with that. But that wasn't, I was brought in after she had this plan. She had started to manipulate it a little bit with the builder's designer, um, architectural designer. But there was clear expectations because there was view things that had to be considered, as well as her lifestyle things. And so we did all of, I mean, before we built anything, obviously, we just took the footprint and we moved rooms and we moved things around and we redesigned how the master suite laid out, how the whole upstairs laid out, how the family room kitchen laid out. I mean, it was pretty much the staircase had to completely flip in orientation. So yeah, and then we did the exterior elevations. I mean, we were like nuts and bolts on all of it. I mean, and when I say that, those were me doing the sketches, and then I gave them to the building designer to put into CAD. And likewise with the exterior elevation, it would be a sketch and me like saying, okay, we want shaker here, and we want stone here, and we want
yeah,
columns here, and that kind of thing. And so I utilized his source for the actual drawings, and then they have to send it off to structural and do all that. But in that case, I had the luxury of working for a period of time for an architect build firm down in Austin and design build. And so I was really used to sitting down with the client, the lead architect, myself, the architect owner of our company, and basically vellum paper, a pencil,
yeah,
circles, bubbles, and
yeah.
just start creating a plan. And so and then I just enjoy that evolution of a project. And so we were doing the windows, we were doing the fireplaces, we were doing the roof color, the paint colors, the cladding materials, um, obviously everything on the interior from cabinets to trim to tile to paint to
All
hardware,
that stuff.
plumbing, all things, and now furniture. So,
Right.
yeah. So, and that's the thing about having a designer involved with that is we're thinking of the lifestyle of the client when we're doing this process and being very in tune to that, which I think is what we can bring as a team member. Like do they have a specific painting that they want to use and utilize, and it needs a certain size wall, or they have a cat or a dog, or whatever those lifestyle things are that not. I just find a lot of times, the there that's why it takes a team, because we listen to all of that and we try to put it all together, and then we try to communicate it in a way that it helps get it executed. And not everybody wants to have to know all that information, but as a designer we tend to know all that information.
Or at least know the person who knows that information if
Yeah, and or know to ask,
yeah,
like
yeah,
I had a years ago, I had a Chinese firm who bought us about 4 condos. This was kind of back in the auction kind of era of the 2009, 2010. One of which was going to be the president of North America's condo when was in town. And they had several businesses or manufacturing things that were in the Oregon, Washington area. And so Oregon was home base for that. I had to work with the feng shui expert who came from China to guide me on where we were oriented in the bed, what
yes.
time we could move into the condo, date and time, hour. And so those are, just kind of the wacky stories that you have because that's what kind of client you have.
Right. Yes, yes. I think so many designers are trying to find the perfect sort of uh set of steps to make a project work, but it's so dependent on the team members, and they're always different. Um, and so few of them have a feng shui master.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
but sometimes you get that.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's not a normal. They may have a local person that they want to have, sage the house or something, but yeah, for the most part, that was the most intense one I had. But there
Yeah.
have been ones, where they want to come through and put mirrors behind sheetrock and um
Interesting. Wow.
yeah, just
Um, Okay, this is one more thing that's a little off my question list, but is relevant to what we've just been talking about. And because I've talked to you before, and I know that you tend to have a certain percentage of your budget geared toward architecture versus furniture, or I think you've indicated that before. Is that true? And if so, does it kind of vary, or is that?
you mean like a fee base, you mean, versus how
No,
much
I
I'm
mean,
making?
when you first get a project, you kind of have a thought about what percentage of your dollars are going toward furniture, or I may have misunderstood you.
No, I mean, I think that kind of goes back to the old school where there used to be this thing about a percentage of the value of the home that they used to have like a zillion years ago,
Yeah.
of which gets very irrelevant on the West Coast or the coast or any place where your real estate costs are
Right. Way up.
exaggerated compared to
Yeah.
other parts of the country. And also, as the world has opened up more, and there's a whole lot, well, except for now, but before now, there was a whole lot more resources for different price points of furniture too.
Yeah.
But I tend to look at this is kind of where I think the psychology of understanding your clients, if you can, or at least evaluating them from a socioeconomic perspective, what do they seem to value? Like what kind of car are they driving? What kind of purse are they carrying? What kind of things are they telling me that they do with their free time? What are their, what do they seem to be passionate about? And then how does that relate or get translated over into what we would do for furnishings and art and
Yeah.
accessory?
That
And
makes
so like if some people are a lot of uh sort of the facade of it, and then some people are, they want the full thing, and a lot of times because we are in an industry that isn't well understood for the cost of goods as far as from medium to high or
yeah.
bespoke or any of that. And so I find it's an opportunity for us to share, educate, um, offer an opportunity for people to perhaps have something that is more in that world, like more custom, more bespoke. It might not be everything, but that usually means maybe more locally sourced or locally made, which sometimes is also a benefit. People like that, or
Yeah.
there's a little bit more hands-on that we can do. Like one of the great things I find is drawing sketching the piece of furniture, kind of drawing it up, meeting with the artisan and craftsperson, talking through how it's going to get fabricated, see if there's any design tweaks that we need to do. Sometimes back uh, several years ago, one of the companies I used, he would also make little mock-ups, like a corner of a dining room
Yeah.
table with all the parts and pieces that were involved, and it's like 15 by 15. It would get stained, and so you could give this to the client and say, "See, here's the 8 pieces of things that make up
This
your
one.
your
Yeah.
tabletop, apron, edge, etc." And it's just very interesting, very creative.
Yeah. Well, especially in this time of super long lead times for
Mhm.
stock furniture, now is a great time, I think, to be turning to artisan local people to be
Right.
making stuff.
Yeah. And a
Uh,
lot of times, like, I mean, even if it's not the 24-week, 28-week lead time we're having right now with upholstery,
yeah.
then you deal with the trucking. Like I just heard a horror story about,
Right.
they're holding furniture that on containers that were picked up in April and
Yes.
have not
Yes.
left North Carolina to get to the Northwest. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
One of
so
the
like
whole,
looking at things and saying, what can we recover? What, what should we be looking at that,
yeah,
either can be custom built local or, whatever, just because, that literally could be, you know, half a year, three quarters of a year before somebody's going to see anything.
definitely. Definitely. Okay, moving on. Are there any processes that you've implemented between you and your client that you thought would make things more successful that just didn't work?
Um, well, the one thing that just resonates to me still is all about communication. And I know in today's world with text messaging, emails, and phone calls, I find that it's in our contract, it's in all of our terms and conditions. We don't do text messaging other than
Yeah,
to say, I'm running late or where am I going, but that is like the hardest thing to get residential clients,
to
in my
do.
opinion, away from, because they're just so used to texting everybody, and it just, they're on that more than they're maybe on their computer or on their iPad or whatever, or any other way that they would do things. So that to me is like a real struggle.
I've tried to implement that kind of thing, and then I find that it shoots me in the foot sometimes because sometimes I just want to send a text message. And
Yeah,
it's,
sometimes we're just as guilty because it's
yeah,
just an easy way to like communicate. Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
It's educating ourselves just as much as our clients.
Exactly. Yeah. Is there anything, I guess, on the flip side that you've implemented that has just knocked it out of the park, made a huge change your in your work?
I'm boy. Um, Sad to say, I can't think of anything that totally comes to mind. However, I will say that there was something that I listened to at market on High Point, a couple markets. Well, a couple years ago at this point, I guess. And it was a designer who spoke, and she talked about, she had a team of 25 or more designers, and they talked about how after every client meeting or every meeting associated with their project, a follow-up email goes out summarizing all the talking points. And at the end of each week, an email goes out to the client talking about what was worked on their project that week.
Yeah.
And they said that made a huge um, difference in how many calls came in on Monday morning about what was going on or where were we at with things. And I think in this particular case they did a whole lot of second and third homes, so that kind of communication was a little different than maybe on your main residence.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something I want to start in on the next like major project that requires a long commitment of time and meetings and things like that. And I just feel like I I feel like we end up being the brain cell of everything. So nobody ever wants to go look at the paperwork. They just call because we have the paperwork.
Yes. Yep,
So,
absolutely.
you
They
know,
want to turn their brains off and let
yeah,
you do all the.
yeah. And I'm like, no, I emailed that to you. And I go, well, yeah, but don't you just have it? And I'm like, well, I can go to my computer and look at it.
Yep. Familiar with that feeling. Um, so failure in our business can come in so many different shapes, and the legendary Sister Parish said you could lose a great client over a lampshade. Is there any piece of a project that you think is the most difficult to pull off successfully? I mean, that could be creating a great design, which I don't think is anyone's struggle. The logistics of purchasing, getting a client to say yes, learning to say no to your client, managing parties whose schedules you have no control over.
Well, especially now. I think
Yeah,
I think the two of those or three of those lists are just, I mean, you can't even wrap your brain around it now. I mean, how much extra time is involved with today's world. But aside of today's world, in normal, kind of the normal world, um, I I think managing expectations is a good one, as far as, and I think that I would say one of the really interesting challenges I have had recently is because of Pinterest and housed to a point, but not maybe quite as much as Pinterest lately. People get something in their mind, like this is what something's going to look like, even
Right.
though their house is
Totally different.
totally different, and well, there may be you're inspired by that. We're not executing that, we're not creating exactly that. And or they get, they have something in their mind, and then when it comes out and they're like going, well, I thought you told me it was going to be like this, and you're like, well, that was just kind of like a global conversation. But once we evolved it, and once we designed it, and once we worked out the logistics of heights and how things were going to transition to each other, this is what you get, and so that to me, and true in some of those cases, we needed to be better communicating. We needed to go back and explain it. And sometimes you just want to work, get it done, move it out,
Yeah.
and with some clients that's fine, and with some clients they need to know all the nuances, and then and if you don't kind of take the time, then sometimes that comes back and bites you.
Yeah. Is there anything like I do them. I think they're critical to a nicely finished home. But like I find window coverings, even with a great resource, one of the hardest pieces of a project. Is there anything that you just are like, oh gosh, I don't want
You and me on window treatments, I think. Would say the other thing is, I used to say I had a pillow phobia
to?
because I love pillows and I love details of pillows. But, there could be 5 things associated with a pillow,
Yes.
between the fabric, the trim, the accent fabric, the form, the fabrication, and you're
Hard
just,
to make a $500 pillow.
well, and it's all the details,
Yeah.
and you kind of get in a role. I think, like, it seems like I sort of bunch my clients together, and then we do all pillows because,
Yes.
you just sort of get in a role, and it's just much easier if you're doing 12 pillows than if you're doing 1 or 2,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So, I think that, those are the kind of, and especially since they tend to dangle, they don't tend to get ordered with the furniture
Yes. It's
often.
like
And so then it just becomes that thing that's sort of hanging out there. And
there's weird middle ground, which you've bitten off a lot with the client budget wise and emotionally to get all the big pieces of furniture. And often I find it's not that long before delivery that they're like ready to think about
Mhm.
how they want to accessorize it.
Right.
And
Yeah. And, and I think that there's some design firms are very successful at, nothing goes out to all of those decisions are done, and the big reveal and install happens.
yeah,
And it's always a goal to manage your clients exactly with that same level of expectation. But sometimes you just aren't that lucky. And so um that's always been kind of an interesting element. So,
yeah. Um, okay. Describe a time when you designed something that you were super confident in, only to see it installed and feel disappointed. And did your client notice at all, or were you the only one who felt sad?
um, it weirdly, I don't have a big recollection of that being a thing.
You've
The
never
except
designed.
for, it's not that I'm perfect. It's just maybe I block it. Maybe I just can't go there.
That's a good
But
protective
yeah,
mechanism.
it's like I don't want to. I just can't handle that. But I would say the one thing that when you were saying that, the only thing that came to mind was this condo I did one time, and I had this really, we had wallpaper on the wall in this entry and foyer, and I wanted to do a really long horizontal mirror. and we had it custom made from the frame company and we installed it, and I'm like, oh, that so does not work, because everything we were reflecting was not attractive. It was door
Uh,
openings and
yeah.
whatever, and all that stuff that you kind of, when you go in the condo, you take your pictures, you kind of make your floor plans, and then you're not back until the kind of install, and so you're not necessarily standing in the foyer imagining what left and right looks like. And so, and I honestly, that was the one time, I don't even think I mentioned it to the client. I just said, we're not going to keep the frame here. We're not keeping the mirror here.
Yeah.
I think I just left it. And I still to this day have that mirror. But I look at it and go, someday I should just take that to consignment. But it's like, he would have not cared probably, but I just could not have that in there. It just,
Yes.
that just didn't work for me. And I was thinking about it, thinking that I I think it's great when designers can budget their profit in a way that it gives them the flexibility of being able to make those choices when something doesn't work,
Yeah.
and either take it back, consign it. Um, as I always call that, the Nordstrom's philosophy of customer service, from those stories about Nordstrom's and tires and whatever. But it's kind of like, um, it's not a perfect, what we do is not a perfect, um,
Yeah.
easily executed thing every single time. You're not going to hit a home run all the time. So, if you can know that sometimes there's going to be a little bit of a miss, and be able to think on the fly and come up with a solution, and just tell, if the client is not aware, that's fine. But just share with them, I don't think this is our best work by keeping it this way. So we need to
Yeah.
do this in order for it to be what is our best work or our better work to do
Yeah.
that.
You have to be so careful, like you said, to make sure that you aren't eating into your own pocket too much by bringing up something the client doesn't notice at all. On the other hand, you have your own name and reputation and
Yeah.
conscience to think of.
Yeah.
Mm.
But equally, there's sometimes, your clients have some thing that is not really great,
Yeah,
but you don't have a choice but to keep it where it
right.
is, because that's their thing,
Put it
and
in the best light possible.
all you say is, when we photograph it, I need you not to be home,
Yep.
because we're not going to have this the way you have it. So, there's, yeah.
Yes. Um, okay. Uh, I think the mark of a great interior designer is one that knows that the function of a room is as important as the way that it looks. Is there a time that you've sacrificed function for beauty and regretted it? And maybe is there a time where you wished you had advocated more for the beautiful, where someone was just being too practical and you,
I find that I actually have a fair number of that when it comes to some of my kitchen and bath projects, because people have kind of saved and slaved for 25 years or whatever on that house that's, 25, 30, 40 years old. And now they want their dream kitchen or their dream bathroom. But at the same time, they're very practical about the money, and some of those kind of beautiful things are oftentimes pricey, and therefore get set aside, especially in the cost of doing business nowadays, for a lot of product and labor.
yeah,
So, what people had their expectations for having a bathroom remodeled or a kitchen remodeled, probably are almost double what they thought it was going to be, if not more. And
yep,
so a lot of, in order to get the function of a new kitchen, you give up the luxury of something fabulous that you would have done.
yep,
And year zillion years ago, we used to say, get the bones right, and you can always, in 4 to 5 years, when the cash is a little bit better, add some of the layers and add some of the cream and add some of
yeah.
that.
Do you think
Nowadays,
that
people
the
people
second
move so much faster nowadays.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think that's the sense anymore
Mm,
because people don't really
no.
plan to be there in
And
5 years?
everybody has instant gratification, right? They think everything should be today. And so I don't, it's kind of like that story about buying the great bones of a sofa and then recovering it from heretofore or changing the arm or doing whatever. And I think it's very generational on who does
Yeah,
that.
I do
And
sort of wonder if the effects of the pandemic on our psyche may discourage some of this, need to move all of the time. I don't know, but people do seem
well,
to constantly move.
correct. And or the constant change, like, instead of having, buying something that you really like and love and you can enjoy for years or, a definite period of time, it becomes more valuable, especially when you start looking at shelves at stores that are empty. And even your stores that you always counted on having something to you within 2 to 3 weeks have no stock, and they're talking 3 to 4 months or
Oh,
longer. So I
yeah.
think just what we're being forced into is kind of a little bit that goes back to, say, the 70s and 80s as far as supply chain,
Yeah.
and how that, I don't know where we're going to shake out when we come out of it, but it will be
Right.
interesting.
Yes. Um, okay. Are there any telltale signs when you meet a new client, as to whether you will or will not work together? And let me just say that I've heard many times you can tell if they offer you a glass of water or not. And on the topic of generational, sometimes I think younger people have not been trained to do that kind of thing. So it is not necessarily a fair gauge of how much they care about you. But what are your sort of
I think
triggers there?
I agree with you. I think the graciousness, the hospitality, the value you for your time to come and meet with them, even if it's the first time, the hello. If you come out and they have you kind of standing in the foyer, while they're on their cell phone or, you know, clearly too busy to have offer you a place to go sit, um, you know, um, I realize people have situations that come up, and it depends upon how they handle that. Like if something came up and they weren't expecting it, and we kind of collided with time. But generally speaking, I would say it's um, how gracious are they, how hospitable are they, but then also how is their interactions with others? Like how do they talk to, maybe if they have a maintenance person there or a yard person or, the nanny or, whatever. And just how, how do they treat others, like, because, pretty soon you'd be on that level if
Yeah, yeah,
just by nature of a course of a project.
yeah.
So, it doesn't mean we stay there, but there's always going to be that one time. So, but yeah, I definitely think we're all at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we all just want to be treated with respect, and we treat them with respect, and we like them to reciprocate.
Yes. Okay. In this vein, is there any time that you've had to sever ties with a client? And did you consider that failure, or do you look back with gratitude?
Complete gratitude.
Yeah.
Most of the time it would be me taking on somebody because, this is a challenge when you're a single person supporting yourself. You don't have the luxury of, having a roof over your
Yeah.
head unless you build the hour. So
Yeah.
um sometimes you take projects that, in the end you should have said no. And so sometimes there are people that just don't understand the process and don't appreciate the process. And I call them, in the nice, not maybe not the best of language, but I just kind of call them the design vampire projects, because they just suck the design out of you,
Yeah,
and
you can't
and
do good work when
you
you're
can't. You just, and you present an idea, and then it just gets, you know, I don't know. And there's just been a few, and over the course of the last 15 years or so, and and you kind of work with it as long as you can, and then eventually you just say, I don't know that I can help you anymore, and
Yes.
I would just like to, fire myself.
Yeah.
So,
See you later.
yeah, yeah. And you
Um,
just feel better. It's like a weight comes off of you
yeah.
because your energy and that's the thing about what we do, at least in my opinion. I have to have, I can't have that weight on me, of, being not able to please somebody ever,
Yeah.
and because it translates itself into other projects because I'm just not in a good
Place.
space, and so it's nice when you remove them.
Yep. Okay, one final question, and then I have a series of rapid fire,
Okay.
one word to one sentence answer
Okay.
questions. So the final real question is, what piece of advice would you give a young person just starting out in the profession?
I would love for people getting into the profession to mentor and intern or go to work for a design firm or a furniture store or anywhere where you can gather experience, because this is such a multifaceted industry. There's just so many nuances and so many things to know. And at the end of the day, we have to sell. I mean, that is what we do. We have to sell a design, we have to sell a piece of furniture, we have to sell. And so there's a lot of that skill set has to be learned someplace. And I think I don't think we, at least I don't see in Portland that is really embraced well, to go work for a firm and learn some things. Yeah, even on a residential level. I think it is on a commercial level, but on a residential level.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it's particularly well embraced, but I think it's excellent advice. Um, okay, here are the fun questions. What is your favorite brand of fabric to specify?
Well, I'd say Cravat.
Yeah.
Love my
So
Cravat people.
easy. So easy to work with.
Yeah, and and it covers the gamut of style,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many fabulous fabric houses out there, though. I mean, and awesome, things to be able to filter in and things like that. But I mean, I think the main go-to I would say is Cravat.
Good answer. That was the correct answer. No, I'm just teasing. Okay, what is your go-to white?
I think I have loved the color. They don't have it in their line anymore, but Sherwin-Williams has a color called Designer White, SW 1904, and I have used it for 25-ish years, and just love it. And so I think a lot of lines have a designer white. Benjamin Moore has a designer white. And I've used that for other people, but for my own house and my own studio spaces, it's always been SW 1904.
SW 1904. I'll go
But
out
they
and get
don't make it anymore, so you have to ask them. And I don't know, maybe it's because the bases have changed. That could be why it went away.
Okay, are there any colors you hate using in a project?
Not really. Gosh, I love like no color, but lots of texture, like a monochromatic or just like a two thing. I love using color. I love like looking at your living room there and having the bright colors and stuff like that. It's great when we start seeing that coming back, because we sort of got very gray and very taupe and very beige in our area. So I love it when clients like some sort of color. Yeah, sorry. I know you said laser.
Oh,
Jennifer's
no,
never
that's okay.
laser.
That's the perfect answer. I love those monochrome palettes too, and I have no idea how to do them well. Like I think that if I would just stick to my guns, I could execute it, but I get scared somewhere along the way that it's going to be too boring.
Well, and I think I think it's the layer of texture, but then in the end, I still want to throw a pillow that has some color.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Describe your ideal project in 3 words.
Wow. Let's see. Well, I guess I like that's a tough one. 3 words. Fun, creative, inspiring.
Okay, that's probably close to what I would have said too. And who is your biggest design hero? Last question.
There's so many. God, I can't just
Yeah.
coming to mind. Oh, you know, I'm never going to say his name right, but I have to say he's kind of a go-to guy that I love too. He's out of San Francisco. I think he's actually sort of retired. He's got a firm there though. And I'm going to be very bad about his name, but I just used to stalk him from design show houses that they used to do down in, well, they still do them in San Francisco. And God, if I had time to Google, I'd find his name for you. But I still will pull up their website because they do all styles, all genres, and you know, very, very high end, very, very sophisticated. Even their, you know, the contemporaries, which sometimes can be even harder to do because it's like the one thing has to be so amazing because there's only one thing. And yeah, I'm sorry.
Is it
I wish
Fisher?
I could remember his name.
Okay, well, that's good enough. You gave us a pretty good description.
Yeah, Google him. Google San Francisco designers. So
well, Jennifer, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me. I've learned a ton from you, and so I can't imagine that others haven't. And I didn't hear any truly epic failures. But
wow,
thank you for being vulnerable, and thanks for all the work you do in our community.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for the time, and this was fun.
All right.
All right.
Later.
Later.